Hello and welcome to the Formbook. Some interesting racing coming up this Saturday across Ascot, Haydock and Wincanton. And we've got two Tipstar champions to preview it all. Here's what's coming up on the Formbook. A busy week in the racing world. Of course, Willie Mullins held his stable tour for the Cheltenham Festival earlier this week. Some good nuggets from that. But to look ahead to all the action this weekend, Katie Midwinter and Dan overall with me. Come to you first, Dan. How's the week been?
Yeah, not too bad. A fairly calm affair. I'm actually on the tipping duty for Racing TV tomorrow, so after this, I need to get my studying on for tomorrow's racing. So all been good. Looking forward to, I think, an interesting weekend of racing. I think the build-up to Cheltenham's obviously started, and as you mentioned, the Willie Mullins stable tour, everyone's kind of in anticipation of March, but still some decent stuff to get stuck into this weekend.
Katie, first time on the show. Katie, of course, is the Tipstar champion from 2023. Thanks for joining us. Looking forward to having you on. Competitive racing this weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, some good racing across the cards, really. And then we'll be looking ahead at Cheltenham, as Dan mentioned. And I really enjoyed seeing all the action from the yard visits in Ireland this week. Really whets the appetite. So, but looking forward to what's going to happen this weekend. Lots of good horses out on show too, and still some clues that could help us going forward to Cheltenham.
Yeah, as Katie says, plenty of clues. So we'll get straight into the action shortly, but just a little plug for the website. Make sure you check out racingtv.com. Latest tips, news, race cards, results, so you can see Ross Miller giving the selections for today's action. You've got selections from him, Andy Stevens, Dave Neverson. You can find it all. News, plenty this week. You can see Harry Allwood's Cheltenham Festival stable tour with Willie Mullins, where he outlines about 60 plus horses. Only took him an hour to transcribe the other day. And you can watch all the action as well on the racingtv.com website. So make sure you are checking that out. Plenty to get stuck into there. Let's though dive right straight into the action, and we'll start off with a Reynoldstown at Ascot. That's at 150. 5 runners go to post: Brave Kingdom, Henry's Thread, Kilbeg King, the King of Ryehope, and Apple Away. Competitive looking contest in terms of how they bet. Apple Away is your 5-4 favourite, 11-4 for Brave Kingdom, Kilbeg King at 7-2, 15-2 for Henry's Friend, and the King of Ryehope is your outsider at 16-1. Katie, let's come to you first. Who do you like in this contest?
Well, I think Apple Away is a worthy favourite. She jumped really well when she won at Leicester. She travelled well at Warwick as well, but she just couldn't go with Grey Dawning when she was asked for an effort. But I think she's short enough here, which has made me look more towards Kilbeg King. He was a very good third behind Illes Francais and Hermes Hélène in the Corto Star. And the last of the challengers to come off the bridle, really, behind Illes Francais. He was travelling very strongly, coming around the home turn. He did have the option of running in the handicap later on this card at Ascot as well, but Connections have decided to opt for Grade 2 Glory. And why not? Because he was behind 2 top-class horses on this day at Kempton. I think he's shaped with a lot of promise, and there's a lot to like about him. So I'd be hoping he could improve a bit further and serve it up to Apple Away.
Okay, that's Katie's thoughts on Kilbeg King. You're in agreement, are you, Dan?
No, I'm a Brave Kingdom fan personally. I think with Kilbeg King, I think it's an interesting point. He faced an impossible task in the Corto Star on hindsight. Le Francais was just electric. Part of me just wants to see it again, because before that, he hadn't necessarily shown that level of form. And I'm sometimes dubious about taking these maybe one-off performances in Grade 1 company. Can they back that up? I'm yet to be convinced. I do like him going forward. I think he's just one to keep an eye on for me personally. Apple Away, as Katie mentioned, the worthy favourite. Obviously, what she's been doing so far has been impressive. Grade 1 winner over hurdles. I don't think you can give her too hard of a time for being beaten last time out by Grey Dawning, because her and Broadway Boy just went a very strong gallop, and I think that took its toll on both of them in the end. It just had nothing left to give, but did beat off Broadway Boy, who I'm a massive fan of. I think in the end, Broadway Boy didn't run his race either, but Apple Away has done little wrong, I'd say, over fences so far, given the calibre of opposition she's been up against. But for me, I do like Brave Kingdom. He's just very unexposed, been somewhat hard to train, I suppose. Just 6 starts under rules, missed all of last season. But this year he's been good, 2 from 2 other fences. He beat an in-form, race-fit rival in his chase debut over 2.5 miles at Plumpton. That would have been far too sharp for him. This is a proper staying chase. and he backed that up at Newbury next time out when he contested the lead with Theatreman. They went a decent gallop themselves up front, and it looked like Theatreman might get the better of it, but Brave Kingdom battled back, and I think he's just the type to only do enough. I think that's generally what I like in my staying chases, not someone to win by overly dramatic distances, just to do the bare minimum to a certain extent to save themselves. And I think he's just exactly that type. And obviously, Theatreman has run extremely well in the competitive novice handicap chase at Cheltenham on Trials Day recently to give that form some substance. On figures, he does have something to find, but I think he's one of those who's still so unexposed, and they've always thought a lot of him. When he was a novice hurdler, he looked like he could be very good, and I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. So considering he's like double the price Apple away, I'll take a chance on Brave Kingdom.
Okay, down with Brave Kingdom, and I'm in agreement as well. So 2 votes for Brave Kingdom, and it's going to be Kilbeg King, which is the selection there for Katie. Next race we're going to have a look at is the 225. That's another interesting race, pretty competitive handicap hurdle. 16 runners there, as you can see, and I will bring the betting up for you as well. Current favourite 6-1 is Irish Hill, 7-1 for Rambo T and Rare Edition, 8-1 for Highland and Monvielle. Bad and JJ Riley at 9-1, 10-1 for Soaring Glory. So that's a look at them. In terms of selections, though, we'll come to Dan first. Who do you like?
I like Rare Edition here. Obviously, I think to a certain extent, I thought he'd go chasing this season, but they seemingly reverted to hurdles and stuck with hurdles with the idea that he is capable of picking up some races like this. On his seasonal reappearance, he was very well backed and only just denied and probably didn't get the best ride. Then here at Kempton, he probably made harder work of it than he should, but he made a bad error 2 out. He battled on well, and to my mind, he just looks like he's really ready for this step up in trip. Obviously, Kempton, 2 miles, quickest ground would be sharp enough. And despite the winning margin not being exactly massive on this occasion, I think he's one with a fair bit in hand. He's only gone up £3 for that to a mark 139. And if you go back to some of the form he showed as a novice hurdler, especially towards the start of the season, so he beat Roubaud very easily. They thought he was going to be maybe a leading Supreme candidate for the British going into the early mid part of last season. Didn't really pan out that way, but I still think he's got a fair bit more to give off a mark 139. This step up in trip looks ideal. He's a full brother to Pencil full of Lead, who won a grade 2 of a 2 mile 6 and finished third in the Firestes. So I think the extra distance will bring a bit more improvement, and a £3 rise for that win I don't think's harsh at all.
Come to you next, Katie. Are you in agreement with Rare Edition?
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. That was a very good win for him at Kempton. He was staying on well and Paul Clear. Fransham was rallying late on, but it looked like Rare Edition had more than enough in the tank left to repel any of the challengers, and he was giving away £18 to the second and third that day as well. Up £3 to a mark of 139. I think it's a very workable mark here in Handicap Company. As Dan has mentioned, he had very good form last season and he beat Roubaud by 7 lengths. Roubaud is now on a mark of 149, and he's probably had more of an opportunity to improve his mark by going to the Dovecot at Kempton and then to the Scottish Champion Hurdle at Ayr, whilst Rare Edition was running in the top novice hurdles at Cheltenham and Aintree. I think this is a really good opportunity for him to get his head in front, and he's a nice price as well. So I'm very much in Rare Edition's for camp here.
3 votes then for Rare Edition in that 225. I think he's open to any amount of improvement, and someone who owns him was on the Irish trip this week and said he would go close, hopefully. Well, there you go. Fingers crossed for a good run from Rare Edition. Next race we're going to have a look at then is the 3 o'clock. Swinley Handicap Chase, 10 runners, 3 under 3-5, Victorino, Shamblu, Iron Bridge, Ballygriffin Cottage, Rapper, Reffles Hill, Do Your Job, Larry, and Torn and Frayed. In terms of how they bet, at the moment, your 4-1 fav is 3 under 3-5, Victorino 9-2 along with Iron Bridge, 5s for Rebels Hill, 13-2 Shamblu, 8-1 Larry, and 10-1 and bigger the remainder. Come to you first on this occasion, Dan. Who do you like here?
It's an interesting race. I don't think those at the top of the market necessarily appeal that much. 3 under 3-5 as favourite. He's been there or thereabouts so many times. He's back on a career high mark now after a decent run at Cheltenham. I think he's just difficult to see him winning. He'll probably be there or thereabouts, but for win purposes, I think he's vulnerable. So I kind of looked a bit further down, and Torn and Frayed I thought was interesting considering he's one of the outsiders. Obviously, hasn't exactly been seen to best effect this season, but I think there's been excuses for that. Obviously, he missed all of last season. Before that, he won a decent race at Cheltenham off just a £1 lower mark than he races off here today. And I think there was promise on a couple of his starts this season. He was running really well in the November Gold Cup on his first run for over 600 days. He was just kind of latched onto the leading bunch, then fell 2 out. But given his absence, I think that was quite a decent run. He then ran again respectably, and I think you can put a line through last time out because it was on really deep ground again at Cheltenham. And this is a horse who wants better ground, and by the look of the forecast, we're going to get ground good to soft maybe at Ascot. I think that's really going to suit him. So he's only £1 above that last winning mark, stepped up to 3 miles. I think he hinted on his penultimate start that he's ready for that step up in trip now. See, we know him more as a Cheltenham specialist, but I don't think this track is going to pose him many issues. He's jumped relatively straight after one, maybe wayward jumping effort when going this way around previously, but I think he's a more mature horse now. Only his 9th start over fences. I think he can improve again for 3 miles. And this race has provided a few shocks, and 10-year-olds, surprisingly, have quite a good record in it. So I think at a price, I'll take a chance on Torn and Frayed to bounce back.
Okay, interesting. Torn and Frayed. You're also the big price runner, are you, Katie?
I am. I'm glad to hear Dan says that 10-year-olds have a good record in this race, because I like a 10-year-old in Rapper. He's a massive price. He's the outsider of the field, but I think on his last winning mark, he's got some decent ground here. I think he's going to have a very good chance of maybe getting into the places and running a big race. And Henry Daly also won this race 2 years ago with Fortescue. Rafa has been withdrawn on 2 occasions earlier this season on account of heavy ground, and his last 4 runs, 3 of which he's failed to complete, have been on softer ground, and maybe he had other excuses those days as well. But his form at this time of the year is very good. Last season, he had a good record from November to February. And before this season, his strike rate during the winter months was at 50%, with 3 wins and 6 runs plus 2 placed efforts. And his only run out of the places at this time of year was last season, when he finished 5th, carrying top weight of 12 stone off a £6 higher mark at Sandown. But now, as I mentioned, down to his last winning mark of 137, when he emphatically won a handicap at Cheltenham, I think he's great value at 33-1.
That's what we like to hear. That's what we like to hear then, don't we? 33-1 Rapper and 14-1 for Torn and Frayed. Good stuff from the guys. The next race we're going to have a look at then is the Ascot Chase. That is the feature on Saturday. Grade 1 contest. Ahoy Senor, Long Press, Pick Dorhey and Sail Away. In terms of how they bet, it's 4-7 for Long Press, 5-2 for Pick Dorhey, 9-2 Ahoy Senor and Sail Away. I think best way of doing this really is discussing all 4 runners in turn. Well, in terms of the interesting ones towards the top of the market. Let's start off then, Katie, with Long Press, a good winner of the Fleur de Lis on the return. We're going to just have a bit of VT from the Brown Advisory. But what did you make of that return when seeing off Protectorate?
It was a very good run. You'd forgive him for maybe being a little bit below par on his return to the track, but he ran very well. He had to be pushed along at one stage, but he responded immediately. And he went past Protectorate before putting the race to bed fairly comfortably. He's definitely a deserving favourite here. The others all have a bit to find on ratings and form to match up with him. He's a brilliant horse, a strong stayer, and he's got loads of class, and he'll like a bit of dig in the ground as well. So there's plenty to like about him, and he's definitely going to be tough to beat. Who
do you like in this though, Katie?
I'm going to have to stick with Ahoy Senor, because I put him up in the Cotswold Chase. I thought he finished a brilliant 4th there after his stirrup had snapped, and everything seemed to go wrong for him in the closing stages, having travelled so well throughout the race. It was a much better performance than we'd seen from him so far this season. He does tend to improve during the second half of the season, and his jumping was less erratic. He's never going to be a horse that's foot perfect over his fences. He is quite quirky in that regard, and there's always that worry that he could make a race-ending mistake. But I did think he would have finished closer at Cheltenham had he not had that issue with the stirrup. And I just thought he jumped well overall. And if he can put in that similar performance this time around, a better ground as well, I think it will really suit him, and hopefully he can serve it up to Long Press.
Dan, let's just take a couple of these in terms of Pick Dorhey first, just to look at the Kempton second last time out.
Well, he's the standard setter to a certain degree because he has his conditions. So we know he likes Ascot. Flat tracks in general, going right-handed seems ideal. He was far from disgraced on this occasion. Time may well prove that giving Banbridge £3 in the Silvagnaco Conti was just a step too far. And he's your kind of typical low 160s horse who maybe is just shy of top grade 1 caliber, but when he has his conditions, it does take a real good one to beat him. And I don't think he ran anywhere near below form on this occasion. I think he was bang up to his best here. So we know he's arriving in form. We know Paul Nicholls, I think he's an absolute master at targeting these types of races. And I think it's unbelievable how many similarities this race as a context bears comparison to the Denman last week. So you have the class act in the race, who last week was Shishkin, now we have Long Presse. You have your solid horse, we had Protectorate, and now we have Pick Dorhey. And then you've got your enigmatic sorts, i.e. Hitman last week and Ahoy Senor. Like the makeup of the race is nearly identical. I think for all that Pick Dorhey is very solid, I just do think Lompresse has the class to beat him, and there are questions I think Lompresse has to answer. Maybe this trip at this stage of his career isn't his ideal, although he does have form over it. Obviously, he can jump out to his left, as we saw in the King George as well. But despite maybe some caveats about that, and maybe the yard of the form yard not being as good as it was early in the season, I'm a massive Lompresse fan, and I think a 90-95% Lompresse still has enough ability to beat Picdori, even with his ideal conditions.
What do you make of his Gold Cup chances before this weekend? You say he comes out and wins easily, but at this stage, would you still have him as a legitimate Gold Cup contender? Is he Britain's best hope of winning the race?
I've been thinking he is for a while, and for as much as people may say Shishkin has maybe more ability and has the ability, I do think Lompresse is maybe the more reliable conveyance, even though he's had that absence. I think to come back and win as he did, despite that absence, I think was really impressive. Obviously, his course and distance, or just short of course and distance form in the Brown Advisory, that was top class, a really good run on that occasion. He seems to handle a variety of conditions, and I think they've been talking about this horse and his resolution, his will to win. And I think you really need that at this kind of level, especially in a race like a Gold Cup. And while Galopin de Champs, obviously an on-form Galopin de Champs, I don't think Lompresse has the ability to beat that level. I think if Galopin de Champs is maybe just below his best, which we've seen on occasion, I think Lompresse can be a serious challenger, but obviously he has to get through this first.
So that's then a look at the Ascot Chase. Ahoy, Senor, for Katie and Lompresse. For Dan, coming up next will be the Kingwell Hurdle after this. It's a decent quintet in the Kingwell. Goshen, Rubo, Nameen Lion, Colonel Mustard, and Guard Your Dreams. In terms of the betting for the race at Wincanton, feature race there on Saturday. 5-4 Fav Rubo, Colonel Mustard at 3-1, Nameen Lion at 7-2, Goshen at 9-2, and 8-1 for Guard Your Dreams. So on this occasion, let's go to Dan first and see who he fancies.
Interesting race. I'm sure Rubo's going to be very popular given, well, he has a pretty solid profile, but I do think he has some questions to answer. He's going to be pretty testing ground at Wincanton. I don't think he necessarily wants that. And obviously, Lorcan Williams being on board is no bad thing, but in place of Harry Cobden, who obviously knows him so well and has given him some very good rides this season, I do think there are questions to answer. And I think Nameen Lion can be the one to take advantage. He still only had 7 hurdle starts and continues to improve. 3rd in the Tolworth last season as a novice, won a handicap earlier this season, 5th in the Greatwood off top weight in a race, as we know, that's worked out extremely well. And then we're seeing here in the Lanzarote, he stepped up to 2 mile 5, travelled really powerfully through the race, made a couple of late errors, as you're about to see. The last one, that kind of ended any chance he had out to his right, fiddled it. Obviously, I think you could argue that maybe stepping back to 2 miles isn't ideal because he clearly got the trip on this occasion. But I think he's one of those versatile horses who won't be inconvenienced by that. And again, this is going to be pretty testing by Wincanton standards. Stamina may well come to the fore. And if the likes of Goshen do get on the front end and challenge Rubo, it could make it into a relative stamina test. And at the weight-adjusted ratings, he only has £1 to fine with Rubo, and he's maybe more unexposed than Rubo is in races like this. I think he had the option of going up to 3 miles. I'm glad they've gone here instead. I think he's got a really good chance. I think his current price is 7-2. I would make him at least clear second favourite. I definitely couldn't have Colonel Mustard shorter than him. So the mean line for me.
The mean line then for Dan. Interesting thoughts. Katie, before we talk about your selection, what do you make of the favourite Rubo?
Oh, I think he's a very good horse. He got an easy lead when he went at the Elite Hurdle, but he did everything fairly smoothly. Hans had made a couple of mistakes later on, as we'll see. Not that it would have made any difference, but he wasn't challenged at all, Rubo, and it was quite a straightforward win. And then behind Constitution Hill in the Christmas Hurdle, he probably ran to form there. He just couldn't lay a glove on Constitution Hill, which is definitely no disgrace. I think he's still improving and he's more than capable of winning at this level. I just wonder if there's one in here that probably beat him. I think Nameen Lion is a good shout from Dan. He's a really tough horse and still quite lightly raced over hurdles. He's amassed plenty of valuable experience though, and he looks a really versatile type. And it is interesting that they've chosen this race for him rather than the step up in trip. But because he does stay a bit further, if it does turn into quite a testing race and a stiff test of stamina, then it will really suit him and it can bring his stamina into play. But I quite like Guard Your Dreams. I thought his return to action was pleasing and I'd hope he'd improve plenty for it. He is a Grade 2 winner when he beat Song for Someone in the International Hurdle a few seasons ago. And he defied a 660-day absence to run fairly well last time, beaten only around 3 lengths by La Venoir, who finished second, with the rest of the pack really well grouped behind Lossy Mouth. I just think he is a horse that is probably going to be overlooked here. But on his day, he's very good. And if he has retained that ability as we see him here, he's got a lot of things in his favour. And he has coped with testing conditions in the past. He's run on heavy. So I don't think that would be too much of a problem for him.
Guard your dreams then in the Kingwell 4. Katie, so that's a look at that contest. Next up is going to be over at Haydock. And the first race we're going to look at there is the Victor Ludorum. Castelfort, Salva, Cusco, and Dame of the Cotswold. Just the 4 runners. In terms of the betting, we've got an odds-on jolly here in Salva. Castelfort at 9-4, 14-1 Dame of the Cotswolds, and Cusco at 25-1. Come to you first here, Dan. What do you make of this contest? Is it all about Salva?
I think it has to be to a certain extent. I mean, realistically, at the best, it's looking a match race, and Salva has looked very good in what he's done so far. Obviously, Gary Moore tends to have 1 or 2 very good juveniles. He's the latest off the production line, and it's hard to really fault much of what he's done. And I think Jane Williams is going to know where she stands with Salva because she keeps running into him. Accelero finished second to him, then Auto Celtic was third, and then finished third again to him again after that in the Coral Finale. So she knows, I think she'll have a line on where Castleford is with those other horses of hers. And it'll be interesting to see if there is market support for Castleford. But we know Salva handles testing ground. I think it's interesting he's got a mark 128 because some have theorised that even though he's a Grade 2 winner, he could go to something like the Fred Winter and be quite well handicapped off that. It'll be interesting to see, obviously, how things develop after this race. But clearly, testing ground is what he enjoys. He may not be one for Cheltenham because of that reason, but he's really hard to fault what he's done so far.
We're going to have a quick look, Katie, at Castelfort's most recent performance. This came at Sandown, but are you in agreement? Are you with Salva?
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely with Salva. I've been quite impressed by him, and he still looked quite green and inexperienced, but I think he'll improve plenty with further experience. I really like the way that he runs through softer ground as well in testing condition. He's got quite a rounded knee action, and at Chepstow in attritional conditions, he was able to win that Grade 2 juvenile hurdle, then put 21 lengths between himself and Balboa, who finished second. I do think Castlefort is a horse that is on the up as well. He's been a little novice-y at times, but he fought back very well there at Sandown. They went slowly enough and the ground was testing. So he'll probably be suited by testing conditions at Haydock as well. But I've just been more taken by Salva and what I've seen so far. And I think he'll just love the conditions at Haydock. So I'd be very much with Salva.
Okay, next race is going to be the Rendlesham, another interesting contest. That's at 240. Botox has Wakul, Butch, Red Risk, Sounds Russian, and Martha Bray. In terms of how they bet, 9-4 Fav Botox has, Butch 5-2, 3-1 Red Risk, 9-2 for Sounds Russian, 16-1 Wakul, and Martha Bray is then next in. Come to Katie first on this occasion because she is keen on the chances of Botox has here, Katie.
Yeah, I very much am. He is a very good horse. I think he's just struggled against the likes of Paisley Park and Crambo and Noble Yates in the past couple of races. But he was travelling very strongly in the Cleve Hurdle as the race developed. He made a bad mistake at the third last and he lost a bit of momentum. I'm not sure he'd have finished much closer than he did in the end. He probably got outclassed a bit in the closing stages and was beaten for speed and just stronger stayers in the end. I'm not sure that Cheltenham is the track that he's most effective at either, but the fact that he's back at Haydock now, he's a course and distance winner, that's a big plus for me. And he's also one that probably prefers a bit more dig in the ground, which he'll definitely get at Haydock. He is a dual Grade 2 winner, and I think in calmer waters at Haydock, he is going to take all of the beating.
Okay, Katie is with Botox has. You're taking her on, Dan, and we've got the VT to show that these two have already met, Botox has and Red Risk.
Yeah, so I was really big on Red Risk on this occasion at quite a big price. He got well backed on the day, and I'm maintaining till the day I die he would have won if he had not fiddled every single hurdle in the home straight. He looked sure to get ahead, and just for some reason just would not go past. And maybe that's credit to Botox has being a very tough individual, very likable horse, or maybe Red Risk just didn't really want to go through with it. But I still think there's a race like this in Red Risk. I thought he would have won on this occasion. He's now £2 better off for when they met on that occasion. And I like the fact that he's had a bit of a freshen up since his last run. This is a horse whose all of his best form comes when fresh. Testing ground, flat tracks, that's his absolute ideal. I don't think there's really many negatives against him. And while maybe he's proven slightly frustrating that he hasn't been able to win a race like this, And again, I'm still herding from that run early in the West Yorkshire Hurdle. I think that this race could set up quite well. It's not exactly a deep race. I'm not massively keen on Butch. I know he's the improver, but I think he has something to prove stepping up to this level. I think he's maybe for staying chases next season. I think Red Risk and Botox has are more than now horses. And while they won't be shaking up the Stayers hurdle market, probably regardless of what happens here, I think Red Risk has a very good chance of reversing the form on this occasion.
Botox has then for Katie, Red Risk for Dan. Grand National Trial. I Will Do It, Chambard, Highland Hunter, Iron Bridge, Fontaine Killange, Famous Bridge, Yeman, Fullback, Credo, and My Silver Lining and Sniper. Is the 11th horse in the race. 3:15 p.m. at Haydock. You're betting 5-1 co-favourites of 3 currently between Iron Bridge, Credo, and My Silver Lining. Famous Bridge at 11-2, 13-2 for I Will Do It, 8-1 for Snipe, 9-1 for Yeman, and Highland Hunter at 10-1. That's in terms of how they bet. But let's go to the guys, see who they like here. Dan, come to you first. Who do you like?
5-1 co-favourites tells you everything you need to know about this race. Wide open. Obviously, it's going to be a test of who handles the conditions the best. And at the bottom of the weight, so I think Snipe has a very good chance of being that one. He should not be a staying chaser at all, judged on his pedigree, but I think he shapes as if a real marathon test will actually suit him. He was smuggled onto the race on this occasion at Aintree on Boxing Day, ridden patiently, came through, and won with a fair bit of authority in the end, I think. The third is one next time out to give the form a bit of substance as well. And he's one of those, I think, is just slowly emerging as a staying chaser to maybe take note of. Maybe not at the top level, but I think races like this are well within his remit. Again, we say Haydock, heavy ground. The fact he's off such a low weight, he's going to have Tristan Dole claiming off him as well. I think that's really going to be important. And I think he'll just be snuggled around in the back. I think the step up to a real marathon test will suit. I think he could be one. At 8-1, I think that's a reasonable price about a horse who's still improving and unexposed at these real marathon distances.
So Snipe for Dan. Katie, who do you like here?
I quite like Famous Bridge. We saw him winning the Tommy Whittle. His jumping wasn't the most efficient at times during that race, but I really like the manner in which he was able to dig deep to grind out the win. It did look unlikely on a couple of occasions. He had a few lengths to make up on Burrows Diamond at one point, but he just seemed to find a second wind and is staying on best of all, as we can see. When he was challenged by Burrows Diamond again here, he just had that extra burst of speed to get away from him. And I think in really testing conditions on Saturday over a marathon trip, it'll take a really strong stayer to beat him. And it's worth noting as well that Nicky Richards is 2 from 3 at Haydock this season. So I'd be hoping his good form can continue here with Famous Bridge.
Okay, the guys like Snipe and Famous Bridge. I'm going to be with Man. He's bidding to become the first Irish train winner of the race in 29 years. Not a great stat, but Gavin Cromwell, I think, is hopeful of a bold show. And he's run a couple of good races already this season. Okay, he fell at Ascot when travelling well behind Victory on the first time. And then they took on each other again last time and he was beaten 3/4 of a length. But I still thought that was a pretty good effort. And he makes appeal in that Grand National Trial. Remember, you can watch all of that racing live on Racing TV. A couple more selections, though, to come in terms of any other business. Dan Overall has got them both.
Yeah, so we've got the last at Wincanton, the 450, and Zonda for John Joe O'Neill. Well, they seemingly held in quite high regard coming into the season. Made a decent debut of hurdles at Chepstow when looking very novice behind Artistic Endeavour and Donica, who have both done pretty well since. Last saw him just before Christmas in a 0-120 handicap of 2 miles 7. Still looked a bit inexperienced, still ran a bit keen, but only beaten 5 lengths in 4th. I thought that was a really promising effort. The 3rd and 5th one next time out. Drops in class to a 0-105 here. I think the site dropped back in distance as well to 2 mile 5 was also a positive, given how keen he can be. I still think there's a fair bit of potential for Mark 103, and I'd be disappointed if he can't go close off that kind of mark. And then the nap is going to come at Haydock, and it's in a Pertemps qualifier, which maybe I'm losing the plot slightly because obviously we know the nature of these races, but Cuthbert Dibble is a horse I'm a big fan of. I had him as a handicapper to follow going into this season. I thought they'd go chasing, but obviously seemingly had a bit of a setback earlier on, so they stuck to hurdles, made his reappearance just under 3 weeks ago at Chepstow. Very well backed and won as he liked in very testing ground. So the testing ground holds no issues at all. This is a horse that was 4-1 for an EBF final and ran a pretty good race from an uncompromising position on that occasion. Obviously, that race has worked out extremely well. Up £8 for that latest win. I don't think he's the barrier of his ability whatsoever. Carried top weight last time out in heavy ground as well. And with Finn Lambert claiming off him as well, I think that's going to help his chances. So while it's a Pertemps qualifier, I still think there's a fair bit more to come from Cuthbert Dibble.
If you were listening on a podcast version, you would have heard Dan's cat meowing there as well in agreement.
Yes,
so
the timing is superb with these things.
What about your nap here then, Katie? Who do you like?
I really like Botox House at Haydock. He's a course and distance winner. I think returning to this track, it's going to really suit him. He's been running in tough races in the Long Walk Hurdle and the Cleve Hurdle, but back at Haydock in what appears to be calmer waters, clears on ratings. I think the others have to improve plenty to match him.
Okay, and my nap is going to be Brave Kingdom. I'm taking on Apple Away. I think Brave Kingdom makes plenty of appeal in the Reynoldstown. So thanks very much to both Katie and Dan for their company. Good luck with their selections. Look forward to having them on again soon. Enjoy all the action on Racing TV this weekend. Don't forget, there's plenty of good stuff to get involved in. There's also a really good card at Goran. Couple of good races there. This is Lantry Lady. Goes in the Red Mills Trial Hurdle for Henry de Bromhead and looks an interesting contender. Hasn't been seen on the track since March 2023, but did it nicely on this occasion. And I think looks like it can serve it up to What's Up Darling in that race at Goram. We've also got the Red Mills Chase. No Fernie Hollow. Heartbreak for the Fernie Hollow fans. We thought he was going to run, but he's not. St. Sam instead will headline that for Team Close Sutton. Of course, a busy month coming up on Racing TV, which of course is headlined by the Cheltenham Festival. Enjoy the action this weekend. Thanks again to Katie and Dan. And do please remember to gamble responsibly.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.